Yo, welcome to Alpha Omega University. Welcome back. Yo, by the way, if you weren't paying attention to the chat or whatever, somebody posted some random shit on the chat. And by the way, listen, I'm gonna repeat this many times, man. I don't know too much about streaming and all that, right? I'm learning, just like you guys are learning the game. I'm learning how to stream. All right. But with that comes the fact that if I see some stupid shit going on in chat, I'm not gonna hesitate and be like, oh, I'm gonna time out this person. I'm gonna look at what I could do with it. No. I'm just gonna ban you. All right, I'm just gonna ban you. I don't want to deal with it because I don't know how to deal with these things. All right, so I'm just gonna straight up ban you. And if I ban somebody or whatever, there's like a way that you guys can try to like get unbanned or whatever. Basically send me a message, or I have the my Discord tag on the top left of the screen, right? You guys can send me a message. Whatever. I'm down to unban people, but I don't want any nonsense, right? I don't mind debates, I don't mind conversations, but I don't feel like dealing with like immature crap, right? So anyway, all right. Today we're gonna be talking about today's gonna be a general episode, right? Today is gonna be today's episode 7. Range Zergs, right? Tomorrow we're gonna be doing episode 8, melee Zergs. All right. So, like I said, I mentioned this multiple times before in previous streams. I told you guys we're gonna start off real broad, and then we're gonna work our way in, right? And so, again, we started with like talking about metas and overarching ideas and concepts, right? Like calling styles and different compositions of like Zergs and different things that people kind of do in general, right? Now we're starting to kind of dig a little deeper, right? But we're still pretty broad, and we're talking about range Zergs as a whole. So today and tomorrow, the episodes are going to be talking about basically the composition of range Zergs or melee Zergs, right? Tomorrow, and then we're also going to be talking about the play styles of those Zergs. Not just the play styles that you can play with those Zergs, but also the play styles that are actually good versus play styles that are not so good with those Zergs, right? Like if you have a certain type of Zerg and you're playing a certain play style and it just doesn't match, right? We'll be talking about some of those things as well. But the main focus is going to be about the composition of the actual Zergs. And we're also going to be talking about the strengths and weaknesses. That's what we're mostly going to spend our time on, right? So today we're talking about range Zergs. And so here's the thing, right? Range Zergs can vary, and it could be a lot of different kinds of things. And so I had to keep it broad to try to encompass everything that really talks about like range Zergs, right? There's a lot of different styles that you can do within the range Zergs, but I'm going to focus on two different things, right? One of them is going to be like the main Zerg, right? Just in general, like a general range composition of a Zerg. And then the second style that we're going to look at is bomb squad composition, right? Now the bomb squad composition, yo, Baruch, I'm gonna just call you Baruch. All right, yo, thank you, man. I appreciate you. So yeah, we're gonna focus on the compositions, the play styles, the strengths and weaknesses, right? And we're gonna be looking at bomb squads, specifically bomb squads for ranged. We'll talk about bomb squads for the melee tomorrow, where we'll talk about a little bit of like melee bomb squads, right? But we're not going to spend much time on melee bomb squads. And the reason for it is not because it's not viable, not because it's not important, but because bomb squad in general has the same concept, right? Whether it's ranged or melee, it has pretty much the same concept. And the truth is, as a bomb squad, it's better to run ranged bomb squad than melee bomb squad anyway. Right? I'm not saying that melee bomb squads are not good. No, of course not, man. There's so many videos out there with like melee bomb squads just wrecking shit, right? Like it's amazing, right? What some of these people can do. It's great. But what I'm saying is that in general, it is better to run ranged bomb squads than melee. And I'll explain why and all that stuff today, right? So that's going to be the episode today. As always, make sure you guys hit the follow, subscribe if you want to. You don't have to, but I greatly appreciate everything. If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, if you disagree with anything, drop it in the chat. We can have a conversation in it. But, it's not about arguing, right? It's just simply about understanding, like, the different ways about doing things. And if you guys are not clear on something I say, make sure you guys drop it in the chat, and I am reading throughout the entire episode, right? So, all right, let's get into this. We're gonna start off with the main Zerg composition, right? The general ranged Zerg composition. Oh, wait. Before I forget, I gotta mention, I'm gonna drop this right now, but I'm gonna basically ask and see what you guys kind of feel like. If you guys can kind of like give me your ideas on it, the people that are watching right now. Essentially, next week on Saturday, I will not be at home at the time of the stream, right? So I'm gonna ask you guys. There's two options, right? Option number one is just to skip the day, right? So we just don't do the episode. That's gonna be episode, let's see, 7, 8. That's gonna be episode 10. Okay, so whatever it is on schedule, episode 10, that's gonna be episode 10. So it doesn't mean that we're just not gonna do it. It just means that I'm gonna shift the entire schedule one day back, right? The VOD review days are still gonna be Monday, whatever, but I'm just gonna shift all the other days off one day. All right, so that's option one. Option two is I can pre-record the stream and the episode and everything, and then just have it go live at the time that we usually will go live at this time tomorrow, right? Well, next week. So I can do that as well. So let me know in the chat if you guys have any opinion on it. If you don't have any opinion, then you don't have to respond or whatever, but I'll take a look at it. You guys can think about it. I'll ask you guys again at the end of the episode. Anyway, let's get on to it. So the main Zerg composition in general, the main Zerg composition of a ranged Zerg is generally speaking, you want big AoE damage, right? With ranged DPS, you want big AoE damage, right? So I want you guys to pay attention to the differences between ranged and melee, right? And I'm going to touch on some stuff between ranged and melee today. And then tomorrow, I'm going to elaborate even more about the melees, right? But just think about this, right? The AoE of a brimstone, if I'm correct, I may be completely wrong, but if I'm correct, it's a 5-meter radius, right? If I'm wrong, it's going to be 6. But I think 6 is too big. I'm pretty sure it's 5. So if you go and do the math on a brimstone, right? 5-meter radius. The square footage. I don't remember the actual calculation right now, man. I took math a while back, right? But it's a big AoE area, right? Versus when you have like melee weapons, you tend to have like things like Demon Fang, Bridal Fury, that kind of stuff, right? Those tend to have a much smaller radius. Now you might say, oh, well, the tooltip says 5 meters in this direction or whatever. It's like, yeah, that's great. It is still 5 meters, but it's not 5 meters completely around your person, right? Or completely around like a certain point, right? It's only like a subset of that. So even if it says like, oh, well, this says 8 meters. It's like, yeah, it's only 8 meters, but it's directional, right? So you don't have that much width, right? Whereas ranged DPS tend to have a lot bigger width, which means what? For the game mechanics, right? It means that escalation is going to be much better, right? Like AoE escalation. And I'm going to mention it real quick. I try to mention it almost every episode because I know some people don't know it. But real quick, escalation damage is basically when you hit one person, let's say with 100 damage, that person's going to take 100 damage. Great. You hit 2 people. Now, instead of dealing 100, you're going to deal like 110 damage to both of them. If you hit 3 people, it's going to be like 130 damage to both of them, to all 3 of them, and so on and so forth. So the more people that you end up hitting with your damage at the same time, the more damage that you're actually going to hit them with, right? This is why clump and dump is a thing in the game, right? Whether you run ranged or melee, clump and dump is necessary because it's really hard to kill individual players by trying to just hit only one person, right? It's much more likely that they'll survive. So ranged DPS, it's all about big damage and a big AoE, right? So ranged DPS, much more than melee DPS, takes advantage of AoE escalation. Here's the twist though, right? Melee DPS takes advantage of reducing focus fire, right? Now, focus fire, again, it's similar to escalation, but it's where you're receiving damage. So the more people that are hitting you at the same time, the more defense you have, right? And so that's something that you have to pay attention to, because if you're a person that's like out in the front and you're constantly getting hit by people, just a random Q, a random W, a random auto attack, right? You're constantly having a higher focus fire defense. Now, when a ranged DPS hits you, then you're going to be a lot more protected against that range DPS. But the melee DPS, they have a focus fire resilience, right? They have they call it resilience penetration, right? And so the resilience penetration is actually going to cut through some of that or most of that focus fire protection that you do have, right? So that's the trade-off between ranged and melee. Right now, melee is going to crash through the focus fire protection where ranged won't. But remember, ranged will have a larger AoE. Not only will ranged have a larger AoE, but they will also shoot at a distance. So they'll be technically a little safer than the melees that have to get in deep to the enemy. Right? So these are extremely, extremely important differences between ranged and melee. And everything I talk about today, you guys have to have that in the back of your head, because as soon as you start understanding those two differences, you start to realize that one is not better than the other, right? And in a lot of things, and I actually have multiple episodes that are dedicated to trying to explain this even further, right? Where ranged DPS, ranged Zergs versus melee Zergs, they're both really good. It's not like one is better than the other. It's just that one is better than the other in certain situations and the other is better at other situations, right? And so it all comes down to, well, what situation are you going to put yourself in, right? But it doesn't mean that just outright melee is better or outright ranged is better. It's not true. They're both very, very good. So the composition of the main Zerg ranged is going to be like, so you're going to use Brimstone. Brimstone's like the backbone, right? Brimstone's like the backbone of like a main of a main Zerg ranged DPS. And it's because Brimstone has a good AoE distance for one, right? You're able to shoot your E at a distance that is a good amount of distance where you can shoot over walls comfortably, right? If there's a ridge that's like some of the ridges are like pretty wide, right? Most of the time you can still hit a Brimstone over it, right? Beyond that, the AoE 5-meter radius around is actually a pretty decently large AoE radius, right? The third reason Brimstone is actually really, really good, and it's the backbone of ranged DPS Zergs, is because the Q and W are great, right? The W, you have multiple good Ws that you can use with the Brimstone. So we're talking about like fire artillery, right? Fire artillery is really good, especially if you're like in a stationary fight, right? Where you're fighting like castles or territories, things like that. Like fire artillery is actually really, really good, right? But at the same time, if you go open world, firewall's incredible, right? And actually firewall's good in territories and castles as well. But I'm just saying in general, fire artillery is not that good in open world, but you still have a different option for going open world with Brimstone, right? Where the firewall is amazing in open world. There's also some people like running the Firebomb. I think it's called Firebomb, the W that does like, it's like a mini Brimstone kind of. That Firebomb is actually pretty good, right? It adds some damage and stuff, and especially you see that being used in bomb squads, right? And we'll talk about that more later. But you see that being used in bomb squads. So the W of fire, right, is very versatile, right? And that's the point. Remember when we were talking about, if you guys were here for the episode, I think it was 2 episodes ago, we were talking about gearing up, right? Where we were talking about like, oh, you gotta have synergy with your weapons and stuff. This is what I'm talking about. Brimstone has incredible synergy. Not only that, the E does damage in one hit, right? It's not spread out across multiple hits. It's not like the Demon Fang where it hits and then it hits and then it hits, right? It's just all instant, one big damage. So there's no chance to out heal it. Because if it's just gonna hit you hard in one hit and it kills you, there's no chance for a shield or defensive to come in between the damage, right? You either drop that heal or defensive, the shield before the damage hits, or the person's dead. It's just that simple, right? So it's a very straightforward weapon. Not only that, the Brimstone is also non-reflectable, right? Which right now we actually see a large amount of people in the black zones, right? In ZvZ, tanks and supports that wear demon armor, right? So when reflect is such a big thing in the game right now, it has to be seen that having non-reflectable weapons are actually more important now than they usually are when there's not as many demon armors being used on the field, right? So that's why. So Brimstone is the backbone, right? It doesn't mean that everybody that's ranged DPS should be Brimstone. No. I'm just saying in general, it's the backbone because it provides so much utility and so much power to the entire ranged Zerg, right? But there are other weapons that you can use with the ranged Zerg. It's things like Siege Bow, right? Remember, we were talking about versatility. Siege Bow, the E on the Siege Bow is fucking huge, man. It's massive, right? It's massive. Not only that, it does percentage damage. So it actually does more damage to tanks than it does to like backline players, right? The Siege Bow mentality is kind of what we see now with like the Spike Gauntlets, right? Where you hit the tanks more than you hit the back line, right? It's very similar. So kind of look at those two weapons as the interchangeable ranged melee weapons, right? It's the Spike Gauntlets and the Siege Bow. Now, the thing about the Siege Bow is that the AoE is so big, right? It's huge. And so every hit of the Siege Bow is actually going to ensure that you hit a lot of people. Like, unless your Siege Bow guy is like completely and totally out of position, just terrible positioning, that Siege Bow is always going to hit at least 3, 4, maybe even 5 people every single time it hits, right? And you can say, a lot of people say, oh, well, it's not that good because it doesn't do instant damage. Well, listen, I mean, Brimstone does the instant damage, right? But you're not looking to have the exact same thing across the board. The Siege Bow does damage quickly enough where if you, and in a large AoE, enough big AoE that if a clump happens, right, your Zerg gets a clump and then your Siege Bow goes and hits that clump with the first tick. By the time the people inside that clump start to walk away, the Siege Bow already got 3 ticks on them, right? Because the AoE is so big, it takes the enemy a lot longer to get out of the AoE range, right? And that's another thing that the Siege Bow brings to the table is that it brings a lot of really good area denial, right? This is something I've touched on before, but this is very, very important. Area denial is extremely useful because when people see a large AoE dropping in a certain area, they don't want to walk into it. Whether it does a lot of damage or a little bit of damage, they just don't want to walk into it. They see a circle, they see a red marker, they see red lines or whatever, enemy damage coming down. They don't care what it is. They don't want to step in it, right? Because they know that they don't want to take damage for free. And so the Siege Bow is really important in that aspect because the Siege Bow creates areas where the enemy Zerg does not want to stand in. So when a Siege Bow shoots, the enemy naturally is going to get away from that area. Now, it's not going to last forever, right? This is just a moment or two, right? A few seconds. But think about this. If the enemy wants to counter engage you, and you have a Siege Bow shooting multiple times, right? Think about this. A Siege Bow and a Brimstone both go and engage a clump. The Brimstone goes and hits and then needs to get out, right? The Siege Bow is hitting, but the Siege Bow can hit back a little further back than the Brimstone. But what's going to happen is that Brimstone needs to come back early, especially because they don't have a Cleric rope, right? They don't have a lot of defenses. But the Siege Bow is still shooting by the time the Brimstone already came all the way back, right? So the enemy doesn't want to counter on your engage until after they see that your Siege Bow is done shooting, because again, the enemy doesn't want to run into that AoE. So the fact that the Siege Bow stays shooting for so long, it actually buys time for the rest of your DPS to back up, right? Because of that area denial. Now, there are some Zergs who are just ballsy and they're like, fuck it, I don't care if there's a Siege Bow hitting here, I'm gonna go in. And sure, they go in and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But the truth is, no matter what, there are individual players within every Zerg, whether they're the best players in the game or the worst players in the game. I promise you, they see a fucking Siege Bow shooting somewhere, they're gonna usually wait until that Siege Bow is done shooting. Like, I do it myself, and I've played this game for a long ass time, right? And I'm a tank too, right? I see a Siege Bow and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna wait an extra, second. I'm gonna wait an extra half second. And it might seem that half second to a second is not a big deal, but it's a huge deal when it comes to positioning and the enemy timing on their counter engage, right? So area denial through the Siege Bow is extremely important. Beyond the area denial, the fact that they're able to get AoE escalation every time they hit, and they get a decent AoE escalation every time they hit, is extremely important. Now, the Siege Bow obviously has drawbacks, right? Where the Siege Bow has to shoot and stand there for a while, right? So interrupting it tends to be easier, right? Because they're just standing there shooting nonstop, right? So it becomes easier to interrupt them. But also they're also in danger, right? Because they're standing there and they're basically the last DPS to come back, right, from the engage. And so that means that they're usually going to be in a worse position than, say, like a Brimstone, because a Brimstone just goes in, claps, and comes back, right? So there's obviously, every single one of these has ups and downs, but what I'm saying is that they work with each other, right? Remember, the Brimstone and the Siege Bow, they have different effects and they have different purposes in a Zerg, but they work really well together. Not only that, the Siege Bow Q and W are amazing, right? The Siege Bow Q, the auto fire, the one that shoots like 3 times or 4 times in a row or whatever, that one, it does so much damage, man. Like if you, like just the other day, I was fighting, I think it was like 18 UTC, and I was fighting, we were fighting against Triple X, and I just walked into like the enemy, and I started walking into the enemy a little bit, like I usually do, and I usually get away with this. Why? Because again, I'm a tank, and I get away with just walking into the enemy back line because nobody actually targets me. And even if they want to target me, they don't have anything that's useful to actually target me. So I lose very little HP, so I can just stay in their backline forever, literally forever. And there was this one Siege Bow, man. He had a 6-2 Siege Bow. 6-2 Siege Bow, and this man just goes and he drops 1 Q on me, and I dropped like 15% HP. And I'm like, okay, I'm all right. And then this motherfucker goes and does it again. Next thing I know, I'm like dropping so quick. I'm like, dude, this is insane, right? Like, you're telling me as a tank, I'm losing 15% HP. And by the way, this is when I have focus fire on me, right? Because other guys were hitting me, auto attacks and shit like that. But he on his own was dropping me like 15% of my HP in every single Q that he did. That's massive. I couldn't stay in their backline, right? So he on his own, I mean, granted, the other ones kind of hit me too, but they didn't do that much damage. It was the Q from the auto fire Siege Bow that was just pushing me back, right? These things are incredibly important, and they're super useful because if you clean up your back line, right, with like Siege Bow Qs and stuff, and also the Brimstone Q, right, the single target Q from the Brimstone, those things do so much damage. Enemy tanks can't get in position to actually stop your engages very well. They have to play more defensive, right? So me as a disengaged tank, I hate it when enemies like actually have good Qs and Ws, because then I can't just be inside of them and just wait until they engage and I stop everything. They make my job harder. So those are the Siege Bow and the Brimstone, right? The next one is Energy Shaper, right? Energy Shaper also has the auto fire Q, right? Oh, by the way, the W for the Siege Bow and Energy Shaper, there's multiple good ones. The Pierce one is really good. The Caltrops is also really good, right? The Caltrops actually helps with giving you speed buff, but also slowing down the enemy. So those two things are very, very useful and very important. But yeah, the W Pierce is also really, really good. The Silence is not as good. It's just not as useful, to be honest. But if you want to run Silence, it's okay. It's just not terrible, right? The Energy Shaper is great because the Energy Shaper has such a long AoE and the damage is actually really strong, right? So the Energy Shaper has a drawback though. If you have 2 Energy Shapers hitting the same target, they're gonna basically cancel each other out and only one of them is actually gonna hit, right? So you can only have a limited number of Energy Shapers, but Energy Shaper is really good because of the long line AoE. Now remember this, just because it has a big long range on the AoE for Energy Shaper does not mean it has a wider range than the Siege Bow, right? Because this one is longer than the Siege Bow, but it's very thin compared to the Siege Bow. The Siege Bow is super wide, right? So the area that you're gonna hit with the Energy Shaper is much less. The thing about Energy Shaper is that you need to be able to have somebody that targets really well and knows exactly where to put that Energy Shaper down, right? Energy Shaper is really, really good, and especially because it has standoff distance, right? Standoff distance is where you're able to kind of keep the enemy at a certain distance where they can't reach you quite so well because they know they'll be punished, right? So if you go and engage and you're using a Brimstone, Siege Bow, and Energy Shaper, what you're causing is not only do you have a big area of denial, right? You're also you're extending that area of denial that you're causing onto the enemy by using an Energy Shaper, right? Because if you see, okay, just a Siege Bow range, okay, that's decent. But then you add an Energy Shaper on top of it, and then on top of it, the Energy Shaper can actually move left and right? West and east, whatever you want to call it. And so because the Energy Shaper can pivot, it allows for a greater range of area denial where the enemy's like, no, I want to back off even more, right? All of that helps a ranged DPS Zerg because because what you don't want to do as a ranged DPS Zerg is get enemies inside of you, right? That means that your ranged DPS are basically all gonna die, right? So you have to keep the enemy at arm's length with a ranged Zerg, and these 3 weapons do all of that really well. Now, when it comes to other weapons, right, that are less used, but still really useful, right? And now one of them is more used than the other, but they both bring something different to the table, but it's not in the sense of area denial. It's more about just direct damage. That's the Longbow and the Mist Piercer. Now the Longbow is used quite a bit right now, right? But it's not necessarily being used a lot in ranged Zergs, right? Ranged Zergs tend to favor Brimstones and Siege Bows as opposed to Longbow. And remember, the reasoning is the Q and W, right? Q and W for ranged DPS is so important because you have to clean up your back line. You can't let the enemy Zerg just get inside of you because then you die. Well, the Longbow Q is I don't want to say it's useless, but it's not as useful as Siege Bow's Q and Brimstone's Q. They're just not as useful, right? And then the auto attacks, they're okay, but they're not great, right? The W for Longbow is basically non-existent, right? The Longbow W just doesn't exist. Like, I know that some of you guys are like, oh, no. Like, what do you mean? Of course, explosive arrows is great. Yeah, but what does explosive arrows do? Explosive arrows basically makes the E better, right? That's all it does. It doesn't actually do anything other than just make the E better. Which means what? Without the W, without the explosive arrows, the Longbow E is honestly not that good, right? Like if I were to tell you guys that suddenly SBI decided to change explosive arrows or just remove it from the game, right? I promise you that tomorrow there will be not a single Longbow ever played again in Albion. Because the Longbow E by itself is not that great. But when you pair it with the explosive arrows, now suddenly it becomes a really strong weapon, right? So what I'm talking about is basically the W for the Longbow is non-existent because it's a requirement for the E to function properly, right? So when I look at these weapons like Brimstone, Siege Bow, Energy Shaper, they all have good quality Q and Ws, right? When I look at Longbow and Mist Piercer, because they're both bows, right? They both have pretty useless Qs and Ws, right? Because they only have Qs and Ws that assist their E, and that's it. And now you can say, oh, well, that makes the damage that they bring to the table way better. So it's worth it because it's kind of like a glass cannon build, right? And it's like, sure, but here's the thing. The damage between the Longbow E with explosive arrows versus the damage you're going to get from a Brimstone E, just the E, right, is higher, but not significantly higher, right? So then what you have here is a Longbow E or a Longbow W, the explosive arrows, that helps the E do better, but it doesn't do significantly better than other weapon choices. And on top of it, you basically have an almost useless Q, right? So Longbow, it's being used quite a bit right now, but it's being used because of its low cooldown. The low cooldown allows for a more fluid pressure buildup. But the truth is every other one of your Longbow E's is not going to have that explosive arrows if you're using it exactly at 15-second cooldown repetitions, right? If you're waiting constantly for that explosive arrows, then you're now turning into a weapon that does 20, 22, 23-second cooldowns, rotations, right? And that's not so much better than a 26, 27-second cooldown rotation on a Brimstone or Siege Bow when they have Pork Omelet, right? It's not that much better, right? So what I'm saying is Longbow is good. I'm not saying Longbow is not good. I'm saying it doesn't bring as much to the table when it comes to ranged Zergs as things like Brimstone, Siege Bow, and Energy Shaper do, right? And the last one, like I already mentioned, is the Mist Piercer, right? The Mist Piercer does something very similar, right? The only difference between the Mist Piercer and the Longbow is that the Mist Piercer has the AoE that goes straight in a straight line, right? But also that the Mist Piercer has an extra requirement, and that extra requirement is that you need a Scholar Robe to actually use it properly, right? All of these things handicap the Mist Piercer so much, man. The Mist Piercer is awful as a weapon. Absolutely terrible as a weapon. The thing is that it's not useless, right? It's not useless, but there are so many better options than Mist Piercer, right? The same thing goes for Longbow. Longbow is decent. Longbow can be pretty good. I mean, there's players like Robin Hood RS, right? He goes with a Longbow, man. He gets so many kills, so many claps. I mean, the dude's great. But to that, I kind of say, well, listen, a great player will be great no matter what weapon he's going to wear, right? And that's the truth. A great player is just going to make a difference regardless. You can't just take that extreme example of an amazing player with a longbow and be like, yeah, look, that's amazing, right? No, because you're looking at the player. Robin Hood RS is a great player with longbow. It doesn't mean that longbow is really good. When you look at the majority of players playing longbow, for the most part, they're not that effective. They're just not that effective on the field, right? And so these are things that we have to pay attention to when we're looking at main Zerg composition for a ranged Zerg. The backbone is Brimstone, but then you add on to that a siege bow and maybe an energy shaper or two, and then suddenly you have a really impactful and versatile ranged DPS Zerg, right? So that was all for damage. Right now, there's gonna be other things that we're gonna talk about, right? So if you guys have any questions about any of this, drop it right now in the chat because I am looking. But yeah, there's more about the composition. I just know I had to take an extra amount of time talking about the damage and the reasoning behind Brimstone and Siegebow because they're not being used very often right now, right? I'm starting to see bomb squads coming out with like Siegebow bomb squads and stuff. I never anticipated that. I thought Siegebow was just going to be great in general, but I never thought Siegebow would be picked up with a bomb squad. When we did the VOD review on Monday, we saw Fax using a Siegebow bomb squad, right? And it was great. But 2 days ago or so, I saw a fight from Escalation, and Escalation had a Siegebow bomb squad as well, right? So what I'm saying is that it's getting picked up, man. And you know what? It's criminal, right? It does great. It's amazing. You know, it's just a matter of people relearning how to use these weapons that have basically been put on the top shelf and gathered dust and shit. And now people gotta sweep them up and start using them again. Start learning how to use them again, right? So Starlord says, I was actually going to ask about Miss Piercer towards the end at the Q&A because I was interested. The Q&A. I thought you meant the Q, and I was like, what the fuck's the A? All right, yeah, the Q&A, because I was interested in trying it out. Yeah. Listen, Miss Piercer is cool, right? It's a really cool weapon, right? There's something about that weapon that just looks really fun to play, right? That's the truth. It really is. Like a lot of other weapons are they look boring. They're just like, yeah, that's kind of lame, whatever. You don't feel excited to play those weapons, right? Miss Piercer is exciting. There's something about Miss Piercer that makes it exciting, but it's useless. That's the problem. It's that it's useless. It's cool. It looks cool and it looks fun, but that's where the fun ends though, right? Because you're not actually going to be useful, right? Don't get me wrong. I mean, there are some people that do well with Miss Piercer and stuff, right? Just like I said about Robin Hood with Longbow, right? There are some people that use the Miss Piercer really well, but in general, it's not that good. All right, we're gonna keep it moving. So that was basically what I was talking about when it came to like big damage, right? I call it like big damage, kind of like a big burst DPS, kind of, a lot of damage in one hit, right? But now we're going to talk about a different kind of damage. And this is one of the things that I want to start differentiating from today and tomorrow, because you guys will see there's a trend that is going to happen between all the episodes. And the deeper we get into understanding the Zergs, the compositions, the metas, the things that people wear, why things work, right? There's something that you guys are going to start noticing as a trend. And that's going to be that not all damage is the same. And you cannot classify them all as the same, right? I'll put it this way. Years ago, there wasn't a thing called disengaged tank, right? Disengaged tank was not a thing. And if you watch the meta episodes, Evolving Meta, if you watch those episodes, I explained it there, right? Like years ago, there was no disengaged tank. Like that wasn't a thing. There was no flank tanks, right? There wasn't even engaged tanks, right? It was just tanks in general, right? Just period. Like the tanks, that's it. So the thing about it is now over time, we've separated the tanks and we started looking, some tanks are engaged tanks, some tanks are flank tanks, some tanks are this, clump tanks or whatever, right? Different kinds of tanks, right? We've started splitting them up because we've understood that not all tanks are built the same. And we can't say that all tanks should follow the same criteria or the same rules because they're all very different, right? And as I go further into explaining more and more things in future episodes, you guys will see that every single thing that we call like DPS or tank or support or healer, they all have breakdowns that they come down more and more and more, and they come closer to individual things, right? All right, so with DPS, one of the things is big damage, right? That's what we just talked about. Another one is going to be support damage. Now, give me a second here. Give me a second. All right, I'm back. So, the support damage, right? That's the damage that basically it does damage, right? It's a DPS weapon. It does damage, but it doesn't do as much damage as the big E's from like a Brimstone, Siege Bow, Energy Shaper, Longbow, that kind of stuff, right? So the support damage is actually more geared towards bringing something else to the table, adding versatility. Remember, we were talking about versatility, right? This is about adding versatility to the Zerg so that the Zerg can perform better, right? So support damage are things like Permafrost, Dawnsong, and Bow of Baden, right? So these three are actually what I would classify as support damage. And the reason is because here's the thing, right? Permafrost, it's an instant damage. Well, not necessarily instant, but pretty much instant, right? Permafrost is like an instant damage, kind of like Brimstone, right? All the damage hits in one go, right? But Permafrost doesn't do as much damage as Brimstone. It just doesn't, right? But what does Permafrost bring to the table that Brimstone doesn't, right? Permafrost, I think now it's non-reflectable, right? I think they changed that recently. If they did, you guys can drop it in the chat. I'm pretty sure they made it non-reflectable. But anyway, so aside from that, Permafrost brings to the table a stun, right? It's a stun that actually doesn't care about CC resistances, right? And that's extremely important because if you go and get a clump and your Permafrost goes and hits it with his E, that means that clump is gonna stay there an extra second, right? That's incredible. That's huge because that extra second is the difference between all the other DPS hitting that clump or a cleanse, just cleansing everybody and everybody runs away from the clump. And when the Brimstone drops or the Siege Bow drops, it hits nobody, right? A Permafrost is critical to a Zerg. I actually personally, for a very long time, I didn't believe in the usage of Permafrost. For a very long time, I would tell people, you know what, Permafrost is useless, don't wear it. You're better off running a Brimstone or a Siege Bow. Permafrost is just garbage, right? I used to believe that really well. I don't anymore. Because now I have understood the versatility and the utility of that weapon, right? Because before I used to just look at DPS in general and that's it. And I was like, yeah, DPS needs to do DPS, period. That's it. And Permafrost doesn't do that much DPS, so then it's not good. It's like, that's wrong. Because now when we break it down, we realize there's actually a lot of utility from Permafrost, right? Permafrost stunning the clump and then dealing a decent amount of damage afterwards is really, really, really useful, right? Another one is Dawnsong, right? Dawnsong being able to have a pretty large AoE. The damage, again, is not bad. Comparative to like Brimstone, it's less, but it's not a bad damage. And then on top of it, you have a reduction in healing on that clump. So you're telling me if you have a Brimstone, a Siege Bow, a Perma, and a Dawnsong, and they all hit the same clump, the Permafrost is going to delay the clump from going away enough for the Brimstone and Siege Bow to drop damage. While the Dawnsong is going to ensure that even if the enemy does heal that damage, that the enemy's not going to be able to heal enough before the clump actually gets wiped, right? So when you pair all four of those together, suddenly you have an engage that is almost unstoppable. Now, granted, you have to be able to cast the fucking E, right? So if you don't get to cast the E, then suddenly, I mean, everything I'm saying is pointless. But that goes for every weapon, right? That's not just this weapon. So that's the point I'm trying to make right here, is that Permafrost, Dawnsong, they have their utilities. Now, the next one that also has utility is going to be the Bow of Baden, right? The Badon is actually really, really, really important, right? Because it causes the enemy to not be able to cast anything. So think about this, okay? If the enemy goes and gets clumped, and you're gonna go and hit the clump, but then suddenly they decide to cast something that might actually, help defenses or things like that, right? Like, how often do you see, say, an enigmatic that actually gets clumped in the clump themselves? An enigmatic, right? They get clumped in the clump themselves, and then as soon as they go and cleanse themselves, they go and channel that enigmatic literally on top of themselves or somebody that's next to them, right? And so they get the shield, so they get to survive. And on top of it, they're casting their enigmatic on the rest of the clump, so the rest of the clump gets to survive as well. You have a Bow of Baden on that, suddenly that doesn't matter at all, right? It absolutely doesn't matter at all. The problem with Bow of Baden is that you have to have a clear line of sight to where you're going to engage. Right? So if you hit anything else before you hit that clump, then suddenly it's not as good. But either way, Bow of Baden is really, really, really strong. Not only that, the damage that Bow of Baden does is actually pretty good. Most people disregard it. They're like, oh no, it doesn't do any damage. Here's the thing, it doesn't do any damage if the clump just disappears, right? But if you have, again, things like permafrost, things that allow the clump to stay clumped, then suddenly Bow of Baden can actually do a lot of ticks of damage, and it's gonna do meaningful damage. Beyond that, just like we were talking about with Siege Bow, it's an area denial weapon. You see the Bow of Baden hitting the lightning strike on one specific place, you don't want to stand there, right? So it causes that as well, right? Not only that, Baden, you don't have to channel it, right? Baden is actually a really, really useful weapon. It's a really useful DPS, range DPS weapon, but it's just never, ever been used appropriately, right? If you pair it with these kinds of Zergs that have brimstones, that have siege bows, permas, dawn songs, adding that extra utility with the Baden actually helps a lot. Now, a lot of people say, oh, well, why would I get a Baden when I can just get an Eagle? Hey, listen, that's true. That's absolutely true. I'm not saying that Baden is just better than Eagle or whatever. No. But here's the thing, they perform different functions, right? The Baden does the interrupt, and that's great. That's great. The interrupt is useful from the Eagle. But the Baden does the interrupt and does damage as well, right? Again, the problem with Baden also is Q and W, right? It's not as good Q and W. So that's always going to be a drawback with all bows in general. The Q and W are not that great, right? But anyway, moving on with the damage. Now that's basically the damage things. And again, if you guys have questions about it, go ahead and drop it in the chat. We're gonna move on to the next part here. It's gonna be the tanks, right? So remember, I talked about the difference between a disengaged tank and a clump tank, right? But specifically with ranged DPS Zergs, you want to have a split of the tanks that actually encompasses the ability to be able to kite the enemy, to kind of push back the enemy and not allow them to just flood into you, right? So things like Grove Keeper, and again, a lot of people don't think Grove Keeper is that useful anymore. But the problem is that Grove Keeper is useful. It's just not as useful with melee Zergs. And the meta right now is melee Zergs, right? But it doesn't mean that Grove Keeper is not useful. It just means that Grove Keeper has a specific function. Now, that specific function is that the Grove Keeper, when it engages, right, when it uses the E, it gets resistances. And those resistances are really, really important because they're able to kind of hit the enemy, stop the enemy, go into the enemy, and then come back, right? Because with their resistances, they're able to come back. Now, the other thing that's very important for Grove Keeper is the use of the ring, the inertia ring, right? The inertia ring is so incredibly important because when you're trying to keep an enemy from flooding you, the inertia ring is absolutely vital, right? You don't have anything else in the game that is as useful as inertia ring to ensure the enemy doesn't just walk into your backline, right? Inertia ring is incredibly, incredibly important. But you also need things like Grail Seekers, right? Because Grail Seekers are going to be able to stagger the enemy as they're walking into you. Some of them will get rooted, some of them won't, which means some of them will walk towards your Zerg and some of them will be slowed down, which means that if you're able to turn on the enemy with a ranged DPS Zerg, you hit just the first few guys that are in front of you, you're going to kill them, and the guys behind them are not going to be able to help them because they're too far back, right? Now, when it comes to clump tanks, right now we're seeing a lot of handed justices. We're seeing a lot of not Morningstar, sorry, the one-handed mace, right? We're seeing a lot of one-handed mace. And here's the thing, those two, they're great. But I'll tell you the truth, neither of them existed when there was ranged DPS Zergs on the field as a meta. Now the weapons existed, but people didn't play them. And the reason people didn't play them is simple. It's because they're melee weapons. They're melee clumping weapons. Whereas a Camlan is able to throw the E at a distance, right? The Camlan has, again, standoff distance, right? They throw the E at a distance, so they're able to stay with the ranged Zerg in the back, right? And not have to go all the way into the front, deep into the enemy, right? And if you're kiting, you want to turn around, hit, and then come back, right? So if you turn around with a kiting composition, with a ranged Zerg kiting composition, you turn around, you want to hit and then come back. But if you have your tanks go into the enemy, deep into the enemy to get those clumps, they don't have the ability to just come back as much as a Camlan would. When he throws it at a distance, he's already farther back, right? People nowadays think that Camlan is not good. It's still great. Camlan is still great. It's just that it's not being used in the current meta because Camlan doesn't make sense for melee Zergs, but it 100% makes sense for ranged Zergs, right? So that's the difference between the clump tanks and the disengaged tanks. Now, give me a second here. Yeah, so Hodita Doda says inertial ring plus Duskweaver armor. Yeah, I mean, those things are amazing, right? Because you want to try to run through that slow, especially if you got like Graveguard boots or something like that. But then you won't be able to because the Duskweaver armor is gonna stop that, right? So, all right, those are the things for tanks and DPS. Now, moving on to heals, right? When you're talking about heals with a ranged DPS Zerg, you're gonna want Fallens, obviously, because Fallens are kind of self-explanatory. Fallens are just, they're just great. I mean, the heal, the cleanse, the cooldown timer, the cast range, the AoE. I mean, Fallen is just a given, right? But two other things that are not being used as much right now are Wild and Rampant. Now, Rampant not as much good, but Wild definitely, because with a Wild you can drop it at a distance versus something like a what's the other nature, the one that everybody's using right now? That's fucking it's basically a wild staff that goes with you. Blight, yes, thank you, the weed. Yeah, Blight. So it's like everybody's using Blight, right? But the truth is, it's like you don't really need Blight for ranged Zergs. You don't. You're better off with a Wild because you're able to cast that E at a distance to wherever it's needed, right? Now, the reason that Rampant would also be good is because if you're kiting, you can put it down in the direction that you're kiting, and then people are just going to walk on it, right, as you're kiting back, which is fine. But the fact is that all of these have one thing in common. They're all ranged heals, right? Again, a ranged DPS, a ranged Zerg is not just DPS ranged, but it also encompasses tanks that are ranged, right? Heals that are ranged, right? And supports that are ranged. And we'll get into that right now. So when it comes to supports, we're looking at things like enigmatics, locusts, icicles, right? Great arcanes are also good, even the way they are now, right? Great arcanes are still really good. And occults, right? So let's start with the easy ones. Occult is obviously good because you're going to be mobile, right? Because you're going to engage, and ranged DPS Zergs they're more clothy heavy than melee Zergs, right? Melee Zergs tend to have a lot of like leather jackets, right? And also on top of leather jackets, they also have a lot of Hellion jackets, which actually heal themselves, right? So all these things kind of change the dynamics, right? Whereas ranged DPS Zergs, they're a lot flimsier, right? They're easier to kill because they're a bunch of clothies. And so mobility is extremely important. Kiting is extremely important. So if you have occults, it's going to help a lot. Great arcanes are also really good because usually, and we're going to talk about this in a second, right? When we talk about the playstyle, but usually the playstyle for a ranged DPS Zerg is going to be holding chokes, right? You want to hold chokes at all times with a ranged DPS Zerg. And the reason is simple, is that you have ranged advantage. So you can actually, even though you're holding like a river or something, you can still shoot over the wall, you can shoot over the rivers, you can shoot over distances, right? So holding chokes is extremely important. Now, when you're holding chokes, the enemy's gonna clump trying to get through that choke, right? And the Great Arcane is incredibly important for that. In fact, I just noticed right now, the video you guys are watching, this was like a couple days ago. This was Surf against Militant and other militant allies, right? So it was Surf against one-shot alliances. And we fought on this choke that you guys are watching right now. We fought on this shit for like 20 minutes, man. Really, really good fight. It was really fun, really great. Just overall really good, right? But here's the thing, man. The Surf guys, they had I don't know if they had one, maybe two Great Arcane guys on their side that was completely stopping every full push we tried to do. There were so many times that Surf was dead to rights, and we just tried to full push that choke. I mean, just look at all those bodies, man, right? And we tried to full push that choke, and it was fine. It was great. And that Great Arcane would just Great Arcane everything and literally made it so that we just couldn't walk through. So the fight took way longer simply because of Great Arcane, right? Great Arcane is extremely important. So another thing is the icicles, right? Because you're kiting constantly, Icicle gives you the ability to continue to kite, right? Because Icicle slows down the enemy, but also Icicle has great mobility with the W. So therefore, Icicle is able to do this really well where they're kiting and they're dropping back and they're dropping back and they're keeping the enemy at a distance, which again is the most important thing for a ranged Zerg. The Locusts, I mean, Locusts is extremely important in general. Enigmatic, same thing, right? They're both extremely important. They're used in both ranged and melee Zergs, and they're used effectively, right? There's not a lot more to say about that. Now, I will say Locust is more important for ranged Zergs than it is for melee Zergs, right? And the reason is because ranged Zergs cannot get caught, right? If ranged Zergs get stopped and slowed and rooted and stunned and silenced, then it's going to slow that Zerg down. And if you slow that Zerg down, you're able to catch up to it. So therefore, Locusts are much, much more important for ranged Zergs than melee Zergs. Because melee Zerg, you're trying to catch the enemy. Versus ranged Zerg, you're trying to not let the enemy catch you. So Locust is more important for ranged Zergs than melee. Enigmatic, still always important, no matter what. As long as there's clump and dump mechanics in the game, Enigmatic is going to continue to be extremely important. Let me see here. Let me catch up on the chat. Mr. DeWeed says, yeah, I've often died with Blight because I need to go into the enemy damage. Yep, I'm actually trying Wild tomorrow in ZvZ. Yeah, I mean, listen, the truth is that Blight and Wild do basically the same thing. The difference is whether you're going to do it at a distance or not. The other difference is also that Blight is attached to you, so you can actually move it. Whereas Wild, the moment you cast it, it just stays there, right? So those are the differences between Blight and Wild. But other than that, they're basically the same. And Wild, you actually get to still use your Q and W, whereas Blight, you're channeling it, so you don't get to use that, right? They're both great, but it does matter to what kind of composition your Zerg is running and what kind of style your caller is calling, right? If you're fighting, especially on tight chokes and stuff, you don't want to run Blight. Or, yeah, Blight. You don't want to run Blight, all right, if you're fighting on chokes and stuff. But if you are fighting on chokes, you want Wild. If you're kiting a lot, Blight could be useful, but it's going to put you in danger quite often. Wild tends to be a little better in that respect. So, the last thing about main Zerg composition for ranged, and this also does go for melee as well, but it's just a little different, right? The emphasis on Pierce. Pierce is always going to be important, like Pierce damage, right? It's always going to be important. But the way in which you choose to use that Pierce is going to be different between melee and ranged Zergs. Melee Zergs can use things like carving. Carving is really good in a melee Zerg. Really, really good, right? Things like Realmbreaker, really good in melee Zerg. But it's not as good. Those two are not as good in ranged Zergs, right? In ranged Zergs, you want more like a Spirit Hunter, you want a Damnation. Things that can have a little bit of a standoff distance. I know Spirit Hunter kind of gets in there a little bit, but it has a good range, so you can just drop it and keep running back, right? But generally speaking, the Pierce that you're going to rely on as a ranged DPS Zerg is going to be Damnation, and that's because it's at a distance. Not only is it at a distance, it's a huge AoE, right? So even if you cast it at a distance, the huge AoE is going to make sure you hit whatever you need to hit, right? So the Pierce, let's say like Damnation, is not as good with a melee DPS Zerg. It just isn't, because if a melee DPS Zerg, you want to flood the enemy, you want to get inside the enemy. You get inside the enemy as a Damnation, you're not gonna get out. You know, you're not gonna get out, like, because the Damnation forces you to play Scholar Robe, and Scholar Robe kind of keeps you from getting a lot of defensives that you would have otherwise, right? So those things are all very important for the emphasis on Pierce. Now, moving on to the play style. Right now, the play style, we're gonna do it real quick because I already explained most of it, to be honest. But you want to hold chokes, right? And you wanna kite. You want to have support that allows you to kite, and with kiting, you're not just kiting back and kiting back. You're kiting between chokes, right? You're at a choke, and then the enemy breaks that choke. You want to kite back to the next choke, and then you hold that choke, and then you kite back to the next choke, and you hold that choke, and again and again and again and again, right? I remember there was this fight a long time ago. This is like maybe 3 years ago. I was calling a fight. It was a Blue Army, I think, against Elevate, and I think I was calling Blue Army, and I think it was against Elevate. If not, it was against one of their allies, maybe the Last Home. No, not the Last Home. Sorry, the Lonely Men. It was probably the Lonely Men or Elevate. I can't remember perfectly, but I was calling it a Zerg, and we were basically holding a choke, and we were doing well. And then they flanked us, right? They flanked us, so I had to pull back, and so I pulled back, and I went to another choke, and I did it over and over and over and over again. I literally did this the entire map, like a whole circle around the map, right? And we were alive. We were perfectly fine. We were perfectly alive, and we were actually winning the fight. But then we got to a point where we literally ran out of chokes, right? The next choke was like super far away. And so, you know, we tried to make it to that choke, but we couldn't. And so because we couldn't make it to that choke, the enemy was able to catch up to us, and they killed us in between the two chokes, right? But while I was able to get our Zerg to a different choke, we were just not dying. It's just that simple. Like, we were able to survive literally forever until I ran out of chokes to fight on, right? And so that's the strength of being able to hold chokes and kite to the next choke, right? The next playstyle thing is going to be the formation, right? And generally speaking, you want your Zerg in a crescent formation. And we talked about crescent formation in the last episode, where we were talking about calling styles. But crescent formation is basically like you go and you have your Zerg spread out into a crescent around the enemy. That way you can engage at different angles, right? You don't really want your Zerg all clumped together in one kind of group, because remember, you're gonna have to kite, and if the enemy catches you and it catches that many of you clumped up together, you're not gonna be able to absorb any damage. So ranged Zergs have to be spread out and use the distance that they have, the standoff distance, to their advantage, right? Because you're able to engage at different angles because of the ranged, you're able to stay at a complete arc around your enemy. Whereas ranged or melee DPS, you're gonna have to go into the enemy regardless of anything. So you're gonna clump regardless of where you hit, right? You're gonna clump. So that's the crescent formation style for ranged Zergs. Jotita Dora says Rampant is really good. The healing per second is insane. Yeah, it is. But people don't use it. People don't use it because most of the Zergs right now are running melee DPS, right? All right, give me a second. I gotta drink some water here. All right, I'm back. You gotta stay hydrated, man. I've been sick, and so I gotta stay on top of it, man. And talking so much, it gets to me, it gets to me. But I'm good. All right. So the last part, talking about main Zergs, right? And the rest of this episode is gonna go pretty quick because now we already talked about most of the main important factors. Now we're just gonna talk about, generally speaking, the strengths and weaknesses of main Zergs, and we're gonna talk about bomb squads, right? So, and bomb squads is gonna be pretty quick. There's a lot to unpack, but it's gonna be pretty quick because we already talked about most of it. So, the strengths of a main Zerg ranged DPS is that they get to one-shot clumps, right? That means that if you can one-shot clumps, that means that enemy heals and supports like shields are not as useful, right? The enigmatic won't get as many ticks of their shield off. The healer won't get their heals off in time to save the clump, right? But that's also a strength of melee burst DPS Zergs, right? And I'm gonna make the distinction next episode tomorrow between melee burst and melee brawl, right? Melee bruiser. So they one-shot clumps. The burst style one-shots clumps. Another strength is the coordination, right? The coordination between the Zerg is extremely important. And when it comes to a Zerg that is ranged DPS, the coordination is vital. And you're able to actually work together really well. Everybody's engaging at the same time, right? Everybody's kind of walking together and kiting, and there's synergy between the tanks, between the healers, between the DPS, between the supports, right? There's a lot of synergy. Everybody's working together. Everybody has similar cooldowns, right? Everybody's helping each other out. Whereas things like melee Zergs, they tend not to do that as much because melee Zergs are more individualistic, right? Melee Zergs tend to rely more on the individual player skill level to accomplish things and hit clumps at their own choosing. Ranged DPS Zergs tend to hit clumps together and always move together. Another thing is the safe distance engagement, right? So just the fact that you're ranged, you're able to hit at a distance, and that allows you to hit where you're able to just spread out, right? Whereas you need to clump with a melee Zerg, you clump up on a specific choke, on a specific enemy, on a specific clump, on a specific whatever. Ranged DPS Zergs can actually stay at a distance, right? And we already talked about that, but that's an extremely important benefit to ranged DPS Zergs that melee DPS Zergs don't have. The last strength of a ranged DPS Zerg is that it gets to clean the backline, which means that enemies cannot really walk into your backline for free. They have to work their asses off to get in there. They first have to get through all your disengaged tanks, the peel tanks, and then they have to contend with the fact that the siege bows and the brimstones are dropping constant Qs that are dealing a lot of damage, right? So it helps clean up the backline. The backline is not flooded with enemies, usually. And if it does, then you're kind of screwed. So that's the benefit. Whereas melee DPS Zergs, you tend to cut distance, which means what? You're always going to be surrounded by enemies with a melee Zerg. This is why so many of the fights that we see nowadays, we see Zergs that literally run into each other and then run out in separate directions. And then they run into each other and run out in separate directions. And it's like they're constantly hitting each other. They clash. They create chaos within each other, and then they just separate, and then they do it again, right? Whereas ranged DPS Zergs, it's a lot more controlled. It's a lot more like front lines are established and they're respected, right? You can't just cross into the front line of a well-established ranged DPS Zerg. Now, the weaknesses for ranged DPS, one of the clear ones is that the backline is entirely cloth, right? Like we talked about this earlier. The backline is entirely cloth. Like it's a lot easier to kill a ranged DPS player than a melee because ranged DPS players are going to be all cloth, whereas a melee, they some of them are cloth, some of them are leather. That in itself allows for some ability to kill them easier. Another thing about ranged DPS is that most ranged DPS are prone to interrupts, right? Most ranged DPS have to cast their E's, right? Whereas melee DPS don't have to cast their E's. Most melee DPS, they just drop the E, or if they do cast the E, things like Raven Strike, they're uninterruptible, right? But ranged DPS, they are interruptible, so they're prone to interruptions, right? I know some people are like, oh, well, you can use the face scale hat. Yeah, sure, you can, right? But you have to basically contend with that, regardless of that. Like melee DPS don't have to run face scale hat; they can run something else, right? And that's the point. So that is a weakness from ranged DPS Zerg. Another weakness is positioning, because you're at a distance with melee DPS Zergs. You're at a distance, right? You want to stay at a distance, and so therefore, finding the clump when the caller says engage here or whatever, you have to walk up there and then find a clump yourself. Whereas if you're a melee DPS player, you're already in the front, so you see exactly what clump the caller is calling out for. So you already know what you need to do. It's easier to find that clump as a melee Zerg, as a melee DPS player, than a ranged DPS player. So those are the weaknesses of this kind of Zerg. All right, any questions? Again, drop them in the chat. All right, the last part here, and again, we're gonna go pretty quick through this. It's gonna be the bomb squad, right? Bomb squad composition, it usually involves, for ranged bomb squad composition, usually involves brimstones, longbows, weepings, right? And weepings are really, really used for bomb squads because they don't have a channel time, and they have great damage, and they also have area denial, right? So and they don't get reflected. And this is a very important quality about bomb squads, right? Bomb squads are usually preferred to not get reflected, right? It's very, very important that you don't get reflected as a bomb squad, because guess what? If you're being beamed and you're coming in hot to kill an enemy, and then you see a fucking demon armor, and you get reflected, you're most certainly gonna die, right? You're most certainly gonna die. And so therefore, bomb squads are very, very glass cannony which means that they cannot afford to get reflected, right? They don't have really high HP. They do a ton of damage, which means if they get reflected, that ton of damage hits them hard and they die, right? Jodita says, also makes a lot of difference playing cloth and playing leather. Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge difference. It's a huge difference in the style that you play, in the defenses you have. Yo, Kaz, what's up, man? So yeah, so that's the usually the bomb squad composition, right? There's been other things like Damnation Bomb Squad, when Damnation used to actually deal damage. Those things are used. I've seen some people experimenting with Dawn Song Bomb Squads. They're okay. They're not great. They're okay. Yeah, there's been nowadays, like I said earlier, right? Siege Bow Bomb Squad, I guess it's becoming a thing. I never expected that, but at the same time, I think that yo, Gluttony, yo, what's up, man? Appreciate you. So yeah, I think Siege Bow Bomb Squads are. I'm very happy that people are experimenting with them. I really am, man. I think Siege Bow is an incredible weapon, and I love seeing it on the field again. But the truth is, I don't think Siege Bow Bomb Squads are going to work. And the reason they're not going to work is simple, because, again, they get reflected. So as soon as people start reflecting the shit out of Siege Bow Bomb Squads, they're gonna not be playing Siege Bow Bomb Squads. Now, as a main Zerg, I think Siege Bow is amazing. But for Bomb Squads, it's just not worth it. You're going to get reflected way too often, right? And you're just going to get wiped over and over again. Right, so like I said, right now I know Fax and I know Escalation are both experimenting with Siege Bow Bomb Squads. I hope they can make it work, but I don't think they will. Right, trying to learn how to ZvZ. Yeah, man, bring Olive Arch. Hopefully, Olive Arch can get better, man. One day at a time. All right, so for the Bomb Squads, the type of tanks that you want, because you do want tanks, right? But generally speaking, you don't necessarily want tanks. You just want to have a way to accomplish a clump. Right, with the bomb squads. This is why witch work staff has been used a lot with bomb squads, because the witch work is effectively a tank at a distance, right? But things like Camlands have also been used with bomb squads. The problem with Camland is that the E is way too how do I say this? It's basically like a giant fucking sign that you're about to get bombed, right? And so Camland is not great for bomb squads, because even though it's ranged, and it would be great, because bomb squads benefit from the fact that telegraph. There you go. Thank you. It's so telegraphed, because bomb squads benefit from the fact that it's kind of like a hit that you didn't see coming, right? And that's where bomb squads really get their money, right? It's when they are able to hit a Zerg like out of their blind side. They didn't expect it. They didn't see it coming, and they just get hit hard, right? That's where bomb squads really shine. And so Camland kind of fucks that up. This is why Hodge and One-Handed Mace specifically, One-Handed Mace, has been really useful for bomb squads lately. Witch work, like I said, it's always been useful for bomb squads, but especially more now than it used to before. Bomb squads also need healers, right? They need at least one healer. Sometimes they run two. For the most part, they want to run a Fallen healer. But I've seen things like Blights being used, and Blight is great for it. I mean, don't get me wrong, Blight is great for it. But Fallen is good because let's say that the enemy goes and stuns your bomb squad, right? You drop one Fallen on it and it'll cleanse it, but it also makes sure that they get healed, right? And also the Fallen gets to stay at a distance, right? But things like, again, like Blight is used a lot with bomb squads. Many bomb squads don't even run healers, so it's not like it's a necessity, right? Usually when they need heals, they just back off and they go and get heals from the main Zerg, and then they come back around, right? But if they do run a healer, it's usually Fallen or Blight. They also need movement support, right? Because they need to come in and out quick. Remember, again, it's all about blindsiding your enemy. You want to hit them where they're not looking, which means you want to hit them fast, and you want to get out quick, because you're going to die. They're going to all turn on you, and you're going to die. So having an occult staff is absolutely vital. It's critical to running a bomb squad. You have to have an occult, because the occult itself helps you run in and run out. But beyond that, it also allows the occult to use their beam on the DPS after using their E. So it has a great synergy with bomb squads. Occult is just absolutely necessary. The kind of Pierce, some bomb squads use Pierce, some don't, right? Generally speaking, I think the best option for bomb squads when it comes to Pierce is Spirit Hunter. And the reason is because the Spirit Hunter, again, has a distance, right? But also the Pierce is actually really strong, and it's quick. So you're able to run in, drop that Spirit Hunter E, and then run back out. right? Everything is super quick with the Spirit Hunter. So therefore, using the Spirit Hunter makes sense. You can't really use Carving because you need to have the stacks for it, right? With the Carving. You can't use Damnation because it takes too long. You got to be faster, right? I know some people use Realm Breakers because it's useful and it's quick too. Realm Breakers can work, yeah. It's not bad. It's another good option, but I think Spirit Hunter is the best for bomb squads. Generally speaking, bomb squads have to be 10 people or less in the group. And the reason for that is simply because, well, there's two reasons actually. Number one, the most obvious reason that everybody knows is because when you get to 11 people, it becomes a blob on the map, right? And if you're an extra blob running around behind the enemy Zerg, they're gonna see you a mile away, right? So you have to kind of stay stealth mode. So you cannot go and kind of telegraph where your engagement is gonna be, where your bomb squad's placement is by having a blob running around, right? You just can't. Also, if you have exactly 10, if you happen to run into like any random shitter that's on the field or something, they're gonna make you blob and it's gonna fuck everything up. So you usually want to run like 8 people, right? Now, apart from that, the thing that is also very overlooked about bomb squads and the size of the bomb squad is that less people in the bomb squad is better. And the reason for it is, remember, you're hitting the backside. Usually you're hitting the backside, you're hitting the blind side, which means what? You're hitting the people that do not have focus fire on them, right? Usually you're hitting the people that don't have focus fire on them because you're not usually hitting the front, and the front is what has focus fire, which means that you're basically hitting those that are most vulnerable in the back, which means that you want to take advantage of escalation. That's why you're getting like a witch work or a one-handed mace, right, to clump them. But you're also taking advantage of hitting the enemy that doesn't have a lot of focus fire. But if you go and hit them with 8 different people, you yourself gave them focus fire, right? 8 people focus fire is quite a bit, right? So if you only have 3 DPS and you have them all get beamed, then suddenly those 3 DPS are not gonna put a lot of focus fire on that group, and they're gonna be able to wipe that group much easier. This is why so often we see bomb squads engage, and the bomb squads that actually engage really well usually only engage with 3, max 4 DPS, right? Having a bomb squad does not mean just more DPS. It means you have to have efficient DPS that is gonna accomplish the job without having too many people hitting it, because that's gonna escalate the enemy defenses. So again, the playstyle, right? Getting into the playstyle of the bomb squads. The playstyle is pretty simple, right? You get in, you get out. You engage quick, you run away, right? If you happen to stay there too long, you're gonna die. It's just that simple, because enemy Zergs look at bomb squads as high value targets, right? And I have a whole episode on high value targets, but basically you're a high value target because you're a target that can actually completely on your own. The bomb squads can shift the entire fight. You can have a fight completely won, and then you get hit by a bomb squad, and then suddenly you are completely lost, and you're there's no way for you to gain back the momentum. You just lose the fight, right? Bomb squads are so important to make sure that the enemy gets rid of them, right? So therefore, if you stay there too long, you're gonna get turned on. The enemy is gonna completely collapse on you, and you're not gonna get away. You're gonna die, right? Now, here's the thing: because you have to get away from the enemy quick, your survivability does not depend on your skills. You don't necessarily want Judicator armors. You don't necessarily want demon armors. You don't want disengaged tanks. What you want instead, yo, Kaz, appreciate you, bro. Appreciate you. So what you want instead for bomb squads, for your survivability, because again, survivability is extremely important. But what you actually want to accomplish that survivability is gonna be speed, right? You want to be able to be quick, right? Your survivability comes in the fact that you are able to blindside the enemy and get out before they even blink, right? The best bomb squads in the game have been the ones that have been able to accomplish their job the fastest. And the worst bomb squads in the game are the ones that are so slow to even get anything accomplished, because they always get turned on and they always end up dying. Judita Dota says, the next bomb squad meta will be Clarent Blade. Take a screenshot of this comment. I don't know about that. See, here's the problem, right? Clarent Blade is great. I like Clarent Blade. I think it's a great option right now. I really do. I really like Clarent Blade right now. The problem I have with Clarent Blade is that you're still gonna have to stack it. right? And with that being said, bomb squads, again, they need to be quick in and out. So you need to have all those people stack up and then hit. Why would you do that when you can instead just hit without the stacks, right? With other weapons, is what I'm talking about, with other weapons. So again, it's kind of like Siege Bow, right? The Siege Bow bomb squads, I would love to see Siege Bow bomb squads prevail, but I don't think they will, simply because they get reflected. And I'm pretty sure Clarion Blade also gets reflected. So that's another problem with it, right? But maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. You know, I've been told myself many times that I'm wrong about things, and then, you know, it turns out to be true. So maybe you're right. So, all right. The other parts, like I said before, it's blindsiding the enemy, right? That's the strength of the bomb squad. But also, the bomb squad playstyle is centered around sword engagements. And if you weren't here for like the calling styles episode, real quick, sword engagement is basically when you're all engaging, all your guys are together in one group, and they all kind of push together at one target, one clump. They all hit that one clump from the same angle together, and then they come out together, right? That's a sword engage, because if you look at the way they move, they kind of like, they all group up at the hilt of the sword, and then they all engage all the way down to the tip of the sword, and the tip of the sword is where they actually hit, and then they come back from the tip of the sword, right? So that's basically what the sword engagement is, right? And so that's what bomb squads engage in the style that they engage in. Whereas ranged DPS Zergs, the whole Zerg actually takes more of a crescent style, right? Where they're spread out, they're thinly spread, better thinly spread, so that they can take different angles. Bomb squads, they don't care about angles, they just want to hit quick and come back. All right, so the strengths and weaknesses of the bomb squads is that the strength is that communication. Communication is extremely important strength to bomb squads, right? Because they're usually in a separate comms away from the main Zerg. So they're able to communicate within the 5, 6, 7, or 8 of them, and they're able to communicate every little thing that they're doing with each other, so they can coordinate even better, right? They work together very, very effectively, right? So that is very important, because it also creates it creates better players, because the better players are able to kind of communicate even better and work together on the field even better than a regular Zerg who is just engaging together and only listening to the caller comms, right? So communication is really important for bomb squads, and that is a really big strength. Another strength of them is the element of surprise. We already talked about that extensively, right? They come in, they come out, you don't even see them coming, they hit, there's no time for the enemy to react, right? That's obviously a strength. And the last strength that bomb squads have is that they have, again, minimal focus fire, right? I talked about that earlier. They're hitting enemies that don't have a lot of focus fire, which means that they're hitting enemies that are going to be really, really weak in their defenses, right? And usually this is why the damage that they put out and the clumps that they kill is so quick. They die so quick because they don't have any focus fire on them. And also the escalation is obviously really good, because the clump happens really well. The weaknesses of bomb squads is that they're hella predictable. Like, when I say the element of surprise is a strength, but then I say that their weakness is that they're predictable, here's what I'm trying to say. The element of surprise is a strength when you're able to surprise the enemy, but it's also a weakness when you're not able to surprise them. I can't tell you, like right now, when it comes to bomb squads, the meta in the bomb squads is they use the God, I don't know the name of the armor. The cloth armor that drops like a red burgundy looking ring that basically increases cast or decreases cast time and also increases damage. I forgot what it's called, but anyway, it's basically a thing where they all kind of stand on it, let it tick for like 3-4 hits, and then they go and engage, right? It's so telegraphed, man. It's so telegraphed. And as a disengaged tank, man, I see that every day, and I'm just like, dude, like, I literally just wait until they stop like ticking the damn thing, and it's so easy. It's so telegraphed, right? So this is what I'm talking about. It's like the element of surprise for a bomb squad is most important, but when they go and drop a little freaking red ring and they all stand on top of it for like 2 seconds getting stacked, they're throwing away their element of surprise. They become so predictable, and then I stop them so easily because they literally told me what they're doing, right? It's so easy. So here's the thing. If they are predicted, if the enemy realizes what the enemy bomb squad is doing, then suddenly it becomes extremely, extremely easy to stop them, right? Because again, they're all engaging in a sword engage. So one tank on his own can stop everything. Another weakness is that it's punishable, right? Again, if they're not fast enough, if they're a little slow, or if the enemy stops them, then suddenly they're fucked. Because they're usually engaging from the backside or something like that. And so they don't have the support of the main Zerg to protect them. They're just screwed, right? Unless they're playing from inside the Zerg. But that, again, that has its limitations because you're not hitting where the focus fire isn't, right? You're fighting against focus fire. So the last weakness of bomb squads is that they're unable to control the fight, right? Bomb squads are completely unable to control the fight. They're able to influence the fight, but they're not able to control it. What I mean by that is, at the end of the day, if the fight is walking northeast, right, like the whole fight is moving northeast, then that means that they have to respond to that. They can't themselves influence the direction of the fight as a whole. Sometimes they can. If the enemy's going to go through like a tight choke and they go and position themselves to bomb that tight choke, like they can do that, and that's great, right? And they're technically influencing the fight that way, but they're not necessarily able to completely control the fight at all instances of the fight. They just can't, right? So they can use their damage to help the fight, but they can't completely control the fight because that's up to the callers on each side. Kaz is asking, what do you think having a stopper on bomb squad in any case enemy Zerg engage on it? Grail Seeker or Great Arcane to stop it? I think Great Arcane would be amazing. I really, really do. If you have a Great Arcane, because the Great Arcane can beam, right? They can beam, and then if the enemy counter engages or whatever, they can stop beaming and drop the Great Arcane E real quick, right? So Great Arcane would be amazing. Grail Seeker, not so much, because Grail Seeker would basically force you to hit the enemy, right? So you're actually going to create the focus fire, right? I'm not saying it's bad. Grail Seeker will still be good to help bomb squads, but it's not as useful as Great Arcane because Great Arcane can still perform the bomb squad role, which is to beam, and they can still use the E to stop the enemy and buy time. It's a really, really, really good idea in my opinion. All right, so now we're at the bottom. We're almost done. We're gonna look at the importance of having bomb squads, right? Bomb squads can carry kills for an entire Zerg, right? Bomb squads in history, in the game's history, bomb squads have been able to completely and totally carry entire Zergs, right? There's been multiple Zergs in the game that have literally been absolute shit without their bomb squads. Now, when their bomb squads are out there, they're getting all the kills. I mean, there's so many Zergs, like Escalation right now. They have so many really good bomb squads or bombers or individual solo bombers, right? That get most of their kills almost every single fight, right? You see everybody in the entire Zerg gets 1 or 2 kills, and then the bomb squad players get 8 kills each, right? And it happens every single day, right? Bomb squads are so important because they can carry your entire team in kills. They also create chaos to the enemy, right? And we've talked about chaos multiple times, but they create chaos to the enemy in the sense that the enemy is focused on fighting on one angle, right? They're focused, let's say, on a choke, and they're fighting on a choke against your Zerg. And then the bomb squad comes around and hits them from a different angle, hits them from behind, hits them whatever. Now suddenly they're afraid. They thought that they were going to be safe if they stood back, but now they're realizing that they're getting picked off by the bomb squad if they're standing in the back. So now nowhere is safe. You can't be near the front and you can't be near the back, right? Or when they're backing up, they're kiting successfully and they're doing great. And they're like, yeah, we're going to walk through that choke. And on the other side of that choke, a bomb squad is waiting for them, right? Like that's criminal because even though they only kill 10 people, 15 people out of 100-man Zerg, it still creates such a chaos because they're like, oh my God, so many people got deleted on that choke. Maybe I don't want to cross that choke. And the caller's like yelling, cross the choke, right? But it's like, dude, I just saw like 15 people get wiped on that choke. I don't want to cross it. Right? So it creates chaos. It creates chaos to the enemy. And that's very important for a bomb squad. Another thing is, and I kind of touched on this earlier, it creates growth from within, right? This bomb squads promote future callers, right? Like King Just. King Just is a perfect example, right? King Just started off in like as a solo bomber, and then he kind of led bomb squads and things like that, right? And now he's a full-blown caller, right? Because he was able to kind of grow as a caller, as an individual player, and then into a caller through the use of bomb squads, right? But it also promotes having better players because, again, communication, and because they don't have the support of the main Zerg, the bomb squads, they have to take more responsibility to ensure the safety of the 10-man group, the 8-man group, whatever it is, the bomb squad is. They all have to work together really, really well in order to accomplish the job, right? And so therefore, they have more pressure on them to play better than the average member of a regular main Zerg, right? This is what creates that growth from within the Zerg, right? Having bomb squads in a Zerg helps the Zerg get better as a whole so much. But there's a word of caution that needs to be had about bomb squads, okay? Over-reliance on bomb squads leads to steep declines in quality, okay? Now, I just spent all this time telling you about how bomb squads create growth within the Zerg, and now I'm telling you that if you rely too much on bomb squads, you're basically ensuring the death of your guild, right? How so? So, the reason is bomb squads create groups, identity groups within your guild, where you're like, oh yeah, I'm part of this group. Let's say, here, what video are we watching? Let's see. Facts. Okay, let's say facts. So we're watching a facts video. So let's say your guild is facts, right? And then facts is everybody's working together and everybody's doing great, whatever, right? Maybe you're not doing amazing, but you're doing okay, right? And then facts decides we're gonna have a bomb squad now, okay? And this person are gonna be part of the bomb squad. Now you have a 8-man bomb squad, okay? Great. And every time you go and fight, you have these 8 people carrying the kills for the Zerg every single CTA. What's going to happen is these 8 people are now going to get the ego to their head, and they're going to start thinking, oh, you know what? We, as the 8 people in this bomb squad, we are the ones carrying the guild. So we can make our own guild and be better than them, right? Because they don't want to pay us more. They don't want to give us better weak gears because we deserve it, because we get all the kills. So all the winning is us. We're doing the winning, not the Zerg. It's us 8 people. So then Facts Guild leaders are going to have to be like, damn, like, I don't want to give them much better regears than everybody else because it's not fair. At the same time, it's like, yeah, you're carrying the guild but in kills, but you're not carrying the guild in everything else, right? But these people get an ego about them and they decide that they can make their own guild and make it better, right? This is actually exactly what happened with King Just, right? King Just, we were mentioning him earlier. King Just went, left Blue Army, made his own guild, right? And it was a bomb squad guild and fought an entire war against Blue Army to prove that they were great and that Blue Army wasn't anything without him. Well, here's the thing. They lost. Blue Army showed that Blue Army didn't necessarily need them. But I will say this. Blue Army took an absolute massive hit in quality after all those bomb squads left, right? And this happens all the time. Think about this. When Raid was around, Raid was a massive guild. Raid was very massive, very powerful, right? But they only lasted like a month. Why? Because their bomb squads demanded more. Right? Their bomb squads demanded more and more because their bomb squads were the ones saying that, oh, we're doing all the work. Well, here's the thing, right? Here's the thing. And I have a whole episode called Ego Check because this is very important. Checking your own ego is very important. And the truth is, bomb squads are extremely important and they're extremely useful. But the truth is, bomb squads without a reliable main Zerg are absolutely nothing. They're worthless. They're absolutely worthless, right? And the truth is because, again, bomb squads prevail when they're able to hit the enemy on the blind side, right? Which means that the main Zerg needs to be doing their job to keep the enemy under pressure so that the bomb squad can find an opening in the back and hit them there. But if the main Zerg is dog shit, then the bomb squad won't be able to find any angles because the enemy can't be, you can't find the enemy, when they're not looking because they don't have pressure. So if they don't have pressure from the front, then they're spread out and they're looking everywhere. They're waiting for bomb squads to hit. They're waiting for you to hit. So bomb squads so often look at the kills and the deaths that happen in the ZvZs, are like, yeah, we get the most kills every fight. We demand more. And then they think that they garner more. They think they go and make their own guilds. And by the way, this has happened many times with many bomb squads, right? Across the entire game. Bomb squad people, they gain this ego. They think that they can do it on their own, and they can't. They can't, right? And that's the truth. They can't, because they need to have the support of a strong, centralized main Zerg. Whether it's a ranged or melee Zerg, it doesn't matter. They have to have the support of a strong Zerg. And so bomb squads that end up defecting and going to a different side and saying, I'm going to be better than them, mostly always end up falling apart, right? Because that's just what happens. So again, word of caution, don't rely too much on bomb squads, because very often those bomb squads will get an ego and decide to leave you. And if you relied way too much or invested way too much into your bomb squads, then guess what? You're going to be fucked when they leave. And that was Blue Army. Blue Army was fucked when all the bomb squads left. Blue Army was fucked, and we had to retrain all the individual DPS players, and it took a long time. Trust me, it took a long time. Like, we would engage and literally kill nothing. Every single engage, we'd kill absolutely nothing, right? We would survive a lot because we had great tanks and great supports, but our DPS was just dog shit. For like a season and a half, we literally couldn't kill anything, right? So that's what I'm saying is, now the thing is, Blue Army had a very long history, right? And so Blue Army was able to stay together and rebuild after the bomb squads left. But I'll tell you, most other guilds that don't have that history and that unity, that cohesion, most guilds, after all the bomb squads leave, most guilds will not be able to come back up and retrain and start from scratch. They won't be able to do that, right? So this is why I tell you guys, if you guys are guild leaders or leaders in any aspect, ZvZ leaders, whatever, bomb squads are great. Make sure you guys help them. Make sure you help them grow, because they will help your guild. But you need to make sure that they don't get out of hand, and that you don't over invest in them. All right. So that's it. That's the episode today. We're done. All right. We made it in good time today. All right. We didn't go too far over. Does anybody have any questions about literally anything? It could be what we talked about today or anything else. I know some of you guys have been like messaging me on Discord with just general questions like, what do you think of this build? What do you think of that build? I appreciate it. By the way, I appreciate it. If you feel like, oh, I don't want to bother him or whatever. No, man. I love this. I love this shit, man. I love talking about all these things. I really, truly enjoy it. So you guys have any questions ever? On the top left, there's my Discord link. You guys can just message me at any point in time. Scroll down. If you guys scroll down on Twitch right now, there's a link for the Discord server for the AO University. And you guys can get in touch with me there as well. But yeah, if you guys have any questions right now, go ahead and drop it in the chat. I'll give you guys a minute or so, and then we'll close it up. All right, looks like no questions. All right, thank you guys again for showing up, especially all of you guys subscribing, following. I appreciate you. If you guys haven't followed or subscribed, please do. Hit it right now. Next episode is going to be tomorrow, and like I said, it's going to be melee Zergs. Now, when it comes to melee Zergs, we're not going to go over a lot of the stuff that we went over today. We're going to go over the major differences between a bruiser Zerg and a like a one-shot Zerg. Right? A burst Zerg. So that's going to be the focus of tomorrow. All right. I'll see you guys tomorrow, same time, 00 UTC. And then on Monday, we will have the next VOD review. Oh, wait. Last thing. For you guys that are listening, if you guys have an opinion, let me know on whether or not next week on Saturday, whether or not I should just skip the day and move the entire schedule, or if I should pre-record it and just send it out pre-recorded. Let me know right now in the chat. I'm gonna close it up, but I can still see the chat. So let me know right now in the chat, and then or let me know in Discord, whatever. All right. Thank you guys. See you guys in the next one.